I'm your host, John Sleeting. Today I'm joined by Jeff Wallace.
A wealthy family for matriarch, patriarch, a lot of times that's a lonely place. And I know people are like, oh, cry me a river,
Right.
You're rich. I'm like, no, it is. It's a terrible yoke to carry, right? Then you put this idea of, well, I have all these resources. Well, now I got to do something good with them, right?
Right.
So then it's kind of like, okay, how do we do this and how do we do it well? It's the phone call you get that has nothing to do with money from your client. Right, he's calling you about a family issue because you built that. That's the special place to be.
That aspect of going, no, you're actually just doing life with people. This is the role that you play, and the significance of that. It could be in ministry. It could be, in a not-for-profit. It can be in business, right? That business aspect of making that difference in the world.
And the two words you just used, I think, are so special. And that is, one of the guys came out, and I hate to say it, but he's like, hey, knowledge, it's worthless. He goes, it's free now. Anybody can have knowledge. But what people will pay for, they'll pay for wisdom.
Bingo. Yep.
And I'm like, I've never really thought about it. But wisdom, back to why we talk like this and how we bring out like kind of who you are and what you are. Wisdom is a life full of experiences.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm your host, John Sleeting. Today I'm joined by Jeff Wallace. Jeff is the president of the National Christian Foundation office here in Chicago. NCF is a donor advised fund platform, and we're going to talk about philanthropic giving. However, before we get into that, you're going to get a glimpse into Jeff's varied background. From growing up in small town central Illinois to working in the open outcry pits, being a trader within the Chicago Board of Exchange. He's going to talk about his work in Asia and living over there and what that means. He's going to talk about what it means to work with people charitably. So yes, we're going to cover a lot of ground in this episode. Because you're going to, I think, be inspired and encouraged by Jeff's enthusiasm, his energy, his thirst, his just curiosity to learn and to come alongside individuals and families to figure out how they can best live out their life for themselves, for organizations that are important to them, and charities to make communities better, to make the world a better place, and to do that all in a very legal and tax-efficient way. So I'd say buckle up because we're going to cover a lot of ground. I've known Jeff for a long time. And as we get going, just hold on and maybe take some notes on the side. So with that, Jeff, welcome. And thank you for just carving out the time while you're in town. You're on the road quite a bit. So having this ability to sit down in the studio, have this conversation on philanthropy, thinking through tool, strategy, approach, from a spiritual lens, from a technical lens, your CPA. So as we get started, help listeners understand first, who is Jeff Wallace before we start going through your perspective, your understanding, and your thoughts on this subject.
Well, Jeff Wallace, I always say I'm from central Illinois, and I call that God's country. It's not just flyover country. I call that God's country because I think it was a wonderful upbringing. I didn't grow up with a ton, but I had enough. I would say one of my father's philosophies, which I use with my own children, was he's always kind of like, I'll pay for half that. You want it, I'll pay for half of it. And so it always made me want to work hard. And I watched my father work hard, but I also watched my father write out checks to church, to charity. I watched him do that along with paying the bills. And so those are the things. It's kind of funny. I hadn't even thought about that until you just said that. But that's, I remember those things. Grew up, school was never really that hard for me, but enjoyed it. Ended up at University of Illinois, accounting major. I grew up in the church. I was one of those little kids that said, Mom, Dad, do I have to go to church when we're on vacation? But we did, and you got to do that. But I never really had a relationship with Christ, I'd say, until I was probably in my mid-20s, as I was starting to kind of search and just kind of wonder, like, there's got to be more. So I started out of school with Arthur Anderson, enjoyed that, but traveled a ton. And this is interesting because my mom was all about hard work. But I flew home from L.A., and on Christmas Eve, I got a call from my manager and he's like, hey, we need you back here tomorrow. I was working on the Drexel Burnham Lambert case.
Okay.
For
As a
Arthur
CPA,
Anderson.
so technical.
Yeah. So, and we were doing a lot of different things with the law firms, and it was a big part of the time. And I'm like, Mom, I'm sorry, I got to fly out. And my mother said, nobody should have to fly out on Christmas morning. You need to quit. My mother. Never thought I would hear that from her. And I quit within about 6 months. I had some buddies that were trading, and they were working less and making a lot more money. And that got me to start looking at the trading avenue, and ended up getting very lucky and got a job interview with a small firm, O'Connor Associates. So ended up as a derivatives trader down on the Chicago Board Options Exchange.
Okay. So, all right. So we've already covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Right. In CPA, trader, talking about church. We're going to come back to how all that interconnects and what you're doing today. But go back to those years growing up in Central Illinois. What you observed, what you learned, the work ethic aspect, the gonna split the cost, right, with your parents on buying something. The value. So when we talk about legacy, two questions here. We talk about legacy. What does legacy mean to you? And then what aspect do you believe you're living a legacy that was given to you over time from lessons like that?
Yeah, legacy, it's interesting because we get to work with a lot of families and they talk a lot about it. But for me, I want to pass my values, right? That's the most important part. Obviously, passing on your possessions and other things are important too to your family. But for my mother and father, with me, like church was at the center of our house. So I felt like we've always tried to do that in our house. And I hope my children do that. So many times, when you're talking with families, you can hear like mothers and fathers' hearts just crying about one child that might not be quite there. My kids, I've got a couple of them that are very involved, a couple that are not. But I know, like, I really wasn't that involved. Like, God's got His way.
Yeah.
It's His timing, not ours. All we can do, at some point, I feel like all we can do is get them ready, and then you got to let them fly. And then hopefully we're there to help pick them up if they need to be picked up. But so legacy is I think is really, really important. For me, I want to model. Everything I try to do for my family has been about modeling. So from cooking breakfast at a homeless shelter for over 20 years on Friday mornings, once a month, with the same group of men that's in a small group with, which they're like, Dad, what are you doing? And then them on break, coming home from college, helping me. I'm like, hey, you guys want to come with me? And they would come with me sometimes. Like doing those things to, I just had my daughter who's 22. She's going to DePaul University, and she's working on a project. She goes, Dad, didn't you used to do a lot of work in Lawndale? I'm like, oh yeah, one of my dear friends, and I know you know him, knew him, Gordon Murphy, a mentor of mine, got me involved with Wayne Gordon, coach down in Lawndale. And I remember the first time I told my wife I was going down there. She was scared to death. And I'm like, honey, it's not like that. And then a few times I was down there and I'm like, I was scared to death.
You're right. It was like that.
But I'll never forget, we had a Christmas party for the Lawndale Community Development Corp at a local barber shop down in Lawndale. And I'm like, honey, we really need to go. And she's like, all right, let's go. So we go into this little barber shop. We have pizza. They've got a little DJ set up. And then we start doing karaoke. And I got to sing a song. She ended up not doing it. But we just, it went from, probably not feeling as comfortable to by the end, like she got to meet all the people that I was working with. And the reason I brought that, I think that's important, is that as we work with families, I always say there seems to be a certain driver of generosity in the family. And it's not always the breadwinner that's driving that. Yeah. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I can't say it's always the men or it's always the female, but it's always very interesting to hear how the couples, and to be honest, I shouldn't say this. I guess probably about half of the couples are really working together on it. And about half of them, it's kind of like, I'll admit my wife, like, hey, that's your thing. Like you're so in to that. I love just coming alongside you and letting you go, which I'm I'm fine with that. And every once in a while she will. To other people that are like, no, they're together. They're like making sure their mission vision is all together and they're driving in a certain direction. So it's very interesting hearing how different people, kind of like, how do we do generosity?
How do we do this? And so, because you mentioned, right, the values that you learned from your dad sitting at the table and writing out the checks, even when things were tight at home, right? Still that discipline.
Always.
That legacy lives on in you, and then you passing that on. So you've got multiple daughters, right? So if
4 daughters.
if they were all sitting around the table right now, if I had them here in the studio talking about their father, their dad, that role model, the values that would be passed on to them. You already mentioned one would be like, hey, didn't you do something down in Lawndale? What would your girls say?
I mean, I know hard work would be like, hard work's good for us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they would use the word integrity, but I don't know quite what word they would use, but I wouldn't get upset about that many things. But whenever there was a transgression of someone, like I just like the simple traits, you got to be honest. Mm-hmm. You got to work hard. You're going to look at someone in the eyes. If I ever saw something like that, which they might say it's not a big deal. Oh, Dad, it was just, I'm like, no. Yeah. Like I would stop, like in the middle of something, just stop it. And I think they'd say that. I mean, they talk about now, I love to fix things. I love to help people. Mm-hmm. So they just laugh. They're like, oh, I can't wait till that. My husband's got to pass the Jeff test. They got to be able to do this. They got to be able to put up a light. They got, and I laugh about it. And sometimes I even said to my wife, I'm like, I hope I haven't put expectations, because people are different today than when we grew up. I just think they are. They're different. And so I'm
and the girls' ages are ranged from
27, 26, 24, and 22. So 4 and 5 years, and so it was a busy house, a busy house. And I just heard someone went to the Philippines. So we had a Filipino ama when we lived in Hong Kong. We moved to Hong Kong for 3 years. Lovely lady, Vicky. I just was texting with her on the way over here, actually. She lived with us for 10 years.
Oh,
wow. Here in the States. We didn't bring her back because I'm like, no. We do not need to bring back a Filipino ama with us. But then she came back with another couple, and she wasn't really enjoying it. And I said, hey, Vicky, I'm not gonna take you from them. But if you leave them and go back, I will arrange for you to come over. So she came over, and she's my oldest daughter. And you want to talk about hard? Teach a lady that had never been on a bicycle to drive. It took 4 tests, but we got her license. 2 accidents within the first 6 months of her driving. But the point was I'm like, hey, Vicky, we don't really need you anymore. You still live with us, but you have to become, just like with the kids, you got to become independent, right? So I'm going to help you do that. So first it was driving. Like it was just all these little phases. And now she's married, living on the south side, and just is wonderful and is good. But my youngest daughter, Olivia, I mean, she was kind of a pseudo mom because, with the older daughters just moving around, she was there for Livy. I'll never forget, I came home, last story, it won't be the last story. I came home one day and Vicky's like, hey, Olivia's she's going to tell you something. I go, why? What'd she do? She goes, well, she wanted her bottle. And I said, no, your mom and dad want you off your bottle. And so she's like, Vicky, I'm going to tell my dad you didn't clean the toilets. And I'm like, Livy, what do you mean? You don't do that. So I started talking to her about it. And I know she's just a little kid, but the point is always like, you have to treat people in a way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Treat people the way you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
Right? Just like, I think it's all pretty simple. But I think my daughters would have good things to say. But I guess going to legacy, the ultimate legacy test is, my good friend Gordon Murphy, when he passed, I get a call. Pastor's talking to me, and our church, we know that our church could not hold his funeral. There's just no way. So we ended up, it was held over at Christ Church in Oak Brook. He had 1,200 people come to his funeral, and it was he drove the bus for the Elmhurst baseball team, and he did it just because he wanted to talk into young men's lives, right? And this is a man that did so much for me so much for me. He got me to do so many things that were uncomfortable, to meet people that I would never meet. Like he used to tell me, you think you're Mr. Big Guy or Mr. Trader and you blah, blah, blah. And he'd be like, hey, your checks are great. Your checks are great. They got zeros. Their checks are great. But he's the one that taught me. He goes, your checks are great, but your network is worth 1,000x. If you are willing to introduce your network into what I'm doing or what we're doing, we can change the world. Yeah. And so he was always about, it's writing a check is great, but let's get your feet behind it. Let's get your mind behind it. So he taught me that.
So, and regular listeners know I talk about the human and intellectual capital, right? Just as much as the financial capital, because that time and talent aspect of coming into it. And if you do that, then you can actually turn around and write better checks because they're going to be more targeted. They're going to be written more wisely in terms of how those financial assets are being deployed if you're engaged that way. Before we get into your trading life, and before we move off of the girls, especially if your daughters are all listening to this as a follow-up, right? They'll give you the feedback.
I told one of them, and she's like, you got to tell me, Dad. I want to listen. I said, I will.
Right? So what would you want to convey to them as that aspect? If they were the only ones listening, what would you want to convey to them? And then by extension, their friends, their networks, the other people that are listening, regarding you and regarding this concept of legacy?
Well, what I always say to them is God has made you so special, and no man can ever define you, right? And I've always tried to teach them that to be independent, strong women, but at the same time, I'm very upfront about the way I read the Bible, right? I do think there has to be a head of the house, just like there has to be a CEO of a corporation. So you have to be the best partner you can be. And ultimately, that's not you being subservient, because that person is supposed to serve you, in a way that you could never be served. And so I'd always want them to know that. And then from a legacy standpoint, I know you have grandchildren. I hope someday that God blesses us with grandchildren. But once again, God's time, not ours. And I want them to be able to do the same things. I want them to grow their children up in the church. I want them to understand that hard work is important. And I want them to know that their mom and dad love it more than anything in the world. Right? Just the way Christ loved us. No different.
Right. So pause for a second, right? Catch your breath on that too, because that, in the end, this legacy component, how fragile life is, how short life is, way too many things and stories we're talking about, even coming into today. You never know when that time is, right? So making sure that those messages are getting conveyed and passed along. And yet there's still life to live, right? And having that impact and communicating that and leveraging the network. So as you're raising, you and your wife are raising 4 young ladies now, girls at that point in time, you go off to the trading world, right? Which has got a lot of bravado into it. I mean, especially back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
So rewind into that coming into trading, the opportunity to see trading, and take people through. I mean, what was that like? What was the life of a trader like back in the day versus all the computers and technology?
Very different.
Right? Very different. How did that play out?
So, you probably can hear it from me. I have a deep voice and I'm very loud. That's a huge advantage when you're on the trading floor. Being above 6 foot is a huge advantage. Being a big person is just a big advantage. Physical altercations could happen at any point. But what I used to always tell people, it was a chaos, yes, but it was an orderly chaos. And if you weren't an honest person, you were found out very quickly and you were done, done. So one of the things I always tell people is, you had a unemployment Friday in the 30-year bond option pit, busiest pit in the world. And I happened at the time was trading for Swiss Bank Corp. We had probably the largest book, one of the largest books in the world, along with Bill Gross at PIMCO and some other places. And we would throw around, we got to throw around these numbers that are ridiculous, but you didn't think about it. But it was anybody that's an athlete, and everybody was pretty much, you had to be confident, you had to be able to quickly think, And you, like, when all others are losing theirs, you can't be losing yours. Right. And so I was a ton of fun. When I started on the CBOE, I remember Sunday night calling my friend Ali Sadat Najati. I'd call Ali and we'd be talking about what we were going to do the next day in the pit. We were so excited, new traders, like what we were going to do. And it pretty much stayed that way. I mean, it was always a ton of fun, but as the computers got, in fact, my wife would say one day, she's like, what happened? She goes, what happened? It used to be, the money was flowing, everything was so easy. And I'm like, well, like at the time, we're investing in other people's businesses, right? I'm like, well, honey, here's how it is. Like when we started, when I went on my own, if I had $250,000 up, if I didn't make $1 million in a year, that was a really bad year, okay? You would expect to do 4, 8, 10x. Then by the end, you're putting up $1 million to $2 million, let's say. And if I could make 10 to 20% on that, I'd be happy. And so I wouldn't invest in my own business. And the reason it changed is the algos, as the computers got involved. I used to play the game of, as the rubber band stretches, it can only stretch so far. So this is where I'm going to bet expected value that it's going to come back to its spot, right? And it would work. Over time, I knew it would work, and it did work. But when the algos got involved, that rubber band could get stretched so far that guys like me could be out of, you'd be out. So then I can't just like lose everything. So now I got to get out of my positions. And so it just got harder and harder. So guys like me, at some point you're like, hey, this doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah. So then I eventually got out.
Yeah. Well, and so that's true today. When people watch the volatility in markets, when you have computer trading that kicks in, it's going to stretch that rubber band to the downside farther than
either
it should
way.
go, right? And to the upside, it gets ahead of itself. And people are like, okay, well, markets are irrational. Well, sometimes you might think that, right? But they could stay there for quite some time. And it's in both directions. So every move gets exaggerated in both directions. It doesn't stay within that normal range of volatility. It all gets stretched now, starting with algorithms back in the day and even through the trading pits. But that's true in markets broadly today.
Oh, yeah.
And people have got, that's where it's like, people that think they can outsmart the computers have got it wrong, right? People that think that, well, this doesn't make any sense and they're going to be smarter than that. It's like, well, no, you're not, because certain aspects of this being driven are not, quote unquote, rational, which is rational if you're a computer at that point in time in terms of how it's playing itself out. So that moving through then, so as you started looking at that, so you're a CPA, Arthur Anderson, now into trading, into the pits, open cry, working through all of that. That starts to dwindle, starts to get squeezed. What's next?
Well, we started a firm outside of O'Connor, and that's a big firm now downtown, and that worked out pretty well. But then I got married at 31, and we had 2 miscarriages before we had Bailey Ming Wallace. And so my wife just would, that's all we talked about was having kids. She comes from 4, I come from 4. And so a buddy of mine that I used to trade with in New York had called me like a year before and said, hey, we have this opportunity. He worked for Bank Paribas in Hong Kong. We're going to buy this trading business. Would you want to come over and run it? No way. I love what I'm doing. I got a good life. I'm here getting married, just got married. I'm done. 2 miscarriages and just watching her world crumble. I said, honey, I think maybe it's maybe good for us to get out of here, to leave. My wife had never even thought about leaving, going to New York, let alone Hong Kong. I called, and this is where I say God has a plan. I called my friend. His name was Eugene Lonigan. Called Gene. He's like, hey, my worldwide boss is actually going to be in Chicago in 2 days, and we have not filled that role. I'm like, well, could I talk to him? He's like, let me call. He calls me back. He's like, yeah, his name's, I'll never forget his name, Bernard Petit, who then had a very successful large hedge fund in the end in Europe. But Bernard comes in, I meet with him that week. I think that was a Wednesday. By Friday, I was basically touring Asia, all the major trading areas for Paribas. Came home and said, yeah, I want to do this. And yeah, so then, of course, I ended up buying a house in Florida, a block away from my in-laws, because my father-in-law told me about it. So I tell him, and we rented it. So I tell my wife, I go, here's the deal. I got to leave. You got to sell the house here in Bucktown. You got to put furniture in the one in Florida, and because we have it rented, and then you can kind of come back and forth. And then once you get that done, you can move over. And we did, but most importantly, started out in Singapore and then ended up in Hong Kong. We got pregnant. Of course, we had just started the process of adoption. There was a place in Hong Kong started by two P&G executives that my wife was volunteering at. A lot in Asia, a lot of times when they don't have boys, right? If they have girls, the girls end up out on the steps. And so this place, I forget what they called it. Maybe it was called Mother's Choice. I can't think of the name. She started working for them. So we just started the paperwork. We get pregnant. So we stop. And we ended up having our first daughter there. She's a 5'10" redhead. And we gave her a Chinese middle name, Ming. So it's Bailey Ming Wallace. And then we came home.
But 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years in Asia.
Southeast. Yeah. And that's what, growing up in Central Illinois, right? And then being over there. And I tell people, best steak I ever had. Yeah. So I spent time in Singapore. And best steak I ever had was actually the American Club overlooking the harbor. It was. I still remember. It was one of. Yeah. I don't know if it was the setting, the nuance, whatever it was, but it was fantastic. But very different. Very different. What did you learn then, growing up Central Illinois, about the world? Being a global citizen, having perspective outside of the U.S. What has stuck with you to this day from the experience between Singapore and Hong Kong?
The first thing I learned there was the Asian male works a ton. It's expected to go out to dinner. You're expected to entertain. That's one of the things I learned early. The other thing is I used to love to read the South China Morning Post. Great paper, English paper. And just my father-in-law used to worry about me because I think you just get a different perspective of how the world views the United States. Right. Like America's great. It's the best. And then you go overseas and you're kind of like, hey, I think they might have a point on some of this. Maybe we're not as altruistic as we want to say. Maybe it is more about the policy. So that was a neat thing. I mean, the people were lovely. I mean, really, I met a lot of really neat people. But one thing I'll never forget was just see how the Chinese treated the Filipinos. Was not a pretty thing, and how much the Japanese and the Chinese, like I knew nothing about that, about the world wars and that. Yeah. I ended up working I worked for a bank, but I ended up working for a large hedge fund that was backed at the time by Tokai Bank. And we used to have Yamagata-san was our Japanese managing director. And I learned that on Tuesday and Thursday nights, one of the 6 traders, we were expected to go out to, we would get picked up and we were expected to go out to the karaoke bars. And I kind of learned what karaoke bars actually were then. I'm like, whoa, a little different than I thought. That's not how Danville works. And then
not just karaoke.
No. And then just the idea that his wife and daughters would not move to China, just would not. Like it was below them to come live in Hong Kong. Even though Hong Kong, beautiful place for the wealthy, right? But I didn't know any of that. So, and then the other thing I thought, and I'm sure you learned as being an expat, was it was amazing the expat kids. Because all these families you meet, the kids know like 5 languages, right? And I would be amazed. I'm like, gosh, I thought I felt sorry for the kids. And then I'm like, this is the greatest opportunity in the world for these children.
It's fantastic.
Right?
With my one daughter. I didn't know that. Living over in Cambridge, England. They've been there now, gosh, they lived in Rwanda for a year before that, up to Cambridge. They've been there 8 years now. Our grandkids over there, 6 and 4 now, have already picked up citizenship. But their travel, right, I mean, down through Europe, but down through the African continent too, what they take in, it's a great experience. Now, I still believe the U.S. is the greatest country in the world.
Amen.
But you do need to sometimes lift up your head and look and understand perspective from different places in terms of making better decisions, better policy from an other's viewpoint, and whether that's in Asia is very different than Europe, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
and you said even in Asia is not just Asia.
Oh,
It's if you're in Hong Kong and you cross the border into mainland,
it's
you're a very different world,
place,
right?
Yeah.
So even there, people paint it with a brush that's so broad, and it's like, yeah, it's not a hop from Tokyo down to Singapore, right? I mean that flight's just as long as London to Chicago.
Yeah.
It's like, so this aspect of how the world operates, I think, is just a healthy thing to get out of your own stuff sometimes and learn, right? And walk in others' shoes, so to speak, to have just a better view of the world and to appreciate how we are blessed and what we do have and the security and the protections, everything that comes with being in the United States too. Those things can both exist.
Yeah, I did not have the opportunity. It was definitely not an opportunity to study abroad in college. But 3 of my daughters have studied. Or actually, only two of my daughters have studied abroad, and I was a big proponent for all of them to do it because of that. I'm like, you'll learn more in 6 months overseas than you're ever going to live going to your university.
Yeah,
you are.
You are.
And I was a big proponent of it.
Yeah, I still encourage young people today.
Yeah.
Both. I mean.
I think it is.
My son went Marine Corps, so his study abroad was kind of different, right?
But he learned plenty.
But he learned a lot.
Yes, he did.
And my 2 daughters, though, from their time living from Jerusalem to Cape Town to the Philippines to I mean they're taking that in from the study abroad programs, and the extended. I mean 3-4 months, 4.5 at a time. Hugely. I still look back and go, what was I thinking? Because they were, 18, 19, 20 years old. It's like, what did we let them do?
Yeah.
But I really think it has formed them into a more mature view of the world more broadly and a critical eye to try to understand and interpret how policy shift takes place. Now, listeners probably listen going, what does this all have to do with philanthropy, right?
I'm sorry.
No, that's not on you. But I do think this is really important because you do go from a CPA background. You go from growing up, watching your dad write his checks to the church. You're instilling values, legacy, the impact that you want to make on the world around you. You've got a trader mentality, right, and approach. You've got this global viewpoint. And all of these things then culminate and come together into the work that you're doing now. Because now you can sit with individuals up and down the spectrum in terms of how they're thinking about this subject of philanthropy. So if we make a turn kind of down that lane, share a little bit more. So you're the president of Chicago National Christian Foundation.
Correct.
Share a little bit of the size, scope, breadth of what NCF is, your role, and then we're going to get a little bit more into certain technical aspects then too. But this is the reason that we spend so much time going through, and this is a big thing for us. The reason we spend so much time is people can go out and search and find, right? How do I, give to a donor advised fund? How do I think about a foundation? How, right? With technology, not just disrupting the trading pits, but also the availability of information. It's not about getting information, right? It's not about having book knowledge. It comes into the wisdom regarding how you apply that. And the wisdom from how that all gets applied only comes from life experience, right? Where does the failures kick in? Where do you step in it? Where's risk management? Risk management is how do you protect against the downside? Well, okay, but you're probably not going to get here's all the downside scenarios that you think about, especially when it comes to family, kids, grandkids, extended. So what we were going to want to get to is the wisdom aspect from the technical know-how.
I was reading. I've been really trying to spend a lot more time investigating and researching AI. Like I didn't know about all the different models have specialties, right? But the reason I bring that up, I read a great article, and the 2 words you just used, I think, are so special. And that is, one of the guys came out, and I hate to say it, but he's like, "Hey, knowledge, it's worthless." He goes, "It's free now. Anybody can have knowledge, but what people will pay for, they'll pay for wisdom."
Bingo. Yep.
And I'm like, I've never really thought about it, but wisdom, back to why we talk like this and how we bring out like kind of who you are and what you are. Wisdom is a life full of experiences. Not all good, right? There's a lot of different things that have happened. So the reason I'm at National Christian Foundation was I did this program with my friend Gordon Murphy called the Master's Program. It's the precursor to the Halftime Institute. And it's basically 3 years. You meet quarterly with different people. My friend Kevin, that's how I met Kevin. You just recently did one of these with Kevin. But
okay, so let's pause for a second.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sorry.
So no, because I owe you a big thank you.
Oh, no,
right?
you don't owe me a thank you.
But it just goes back to your network, right?
Right.
And what the gentleman had said about, okay, how do you bring your network to bear, right? Because Jeff, this is where people all over the country. The greater Chicago area and various different wealth management firms and investment advisory firms and family offices that but you turned around and told Kevin and me, you two should probably get together. And,
well, I knew your backgrounds a little bit. I'm like, I think you guys.
Yeah. And my first response was like, we're not hiring, right?
And I said it wasn't about that.
I know, but I always put up the wall first defensively. It's a defensive reflex of going, no. But I'll talk to him, right, for a few minutes. Months through the process. So individuals that want to go back and listen to Kevin's story, that's a couple episodes ago, right?
Yeah,
to go back.
I just listened to it not long ago. Really neat guy.
Kevin's joining us. Absolutely love him. Thank you for making
welcome.
that connection. Thank you for not introducing him to anybody else, right? And even though he was like interviewing all over the place, and he's like, "No, this is the only place I'd want to be." So we love having Kevin on the team, and I think we still owe you a steak for that one too. And
he's a good. Well, I'm happy for Kevin. He's a good friend, right? You always want your best for your friends. But so I did the master's program, and the idea of the master's program in the book is the tagline is to go from success to significance. And I'm not trying to say I'm significant by any means. I always say it's from doing one thing to hopefully doing something a lot better for the world, right? And for me, I define world to kingdom. And I'm not trying to be politically correct. I'm not trying to harm anybody, but for me, it's all about the kingdom. So I did that program.
From your Christian worldview.
Yeah, from my Christian worldview. I'm just being honest. So Murph, he one time was the CEO of Opportunity International. He knew everybody in the nonprofit space. So I'm like, all right, Murph, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. So he just starts introducing me to these opportunities. And he's introducing me some big CEO. I'm like, no, I can't do that. And it literally took almost 2 years. And then NCF came across my desk.
But before we get into NCF in particular, so this concept of success to significance, right? And not about you being significant or the world seeing you that way. But first, how do you define, what was success then? Right? What was success?
Worldly success in your profession is what they're really talking about. And then the book talks a lot about margin. You want to create margin in your life, so time, because what's the most important thing for us? It's time, right? It's probably the most valuable thing. So create time to then, you've proven, they always talk about 100x returns, but you've proven you're really good at this. This is where you've had tremendous success. Well, why aren't you doing that?
From a financial viewpoint, from titles, from
whatever it might be,
celebrity status,
if you're
whatever.
Good,
that's success.
Yeah, and so if you're so good at this, if people look up to you so much in that, why aren't you doing that for the kingdom? Yeah, writing the check's great, but if he's like, you're so good at finance. I was teaching my daughters. I taught the 4 and 5 year olds at my church for like 6 years because my kids wouldn't stay if I wasn't in there, and people would laugh. And I was in there the whole time. And I would be telling Bob Shank, the guy running, and Bob's like, Jeff, you got to get out of there, right? And he's like, why aren't you the finance elder? And I'm like, I haven't even thought about it. He's like, well, that would make sense. Well, I ended up being the finance elder of my church. And I found out that they had a note that had been due for over a year that had not even come out into the church. And just a few things. And so what did I do? I ended up calling 4 buddies and one guy in particular, and we pay that off. And we do a note back, and then we end up raising dollars, and we do some different things, and then I end up swapping out the rate side to bring that way down. But that, for me, that's just like what I know, right?
Right.
And everybody, and I will never forget, like I always say, I learned more going to session meetings. That's in the Presbyterian church that they call the board. I learned more in session meetings than I've ever learned in any board meeting. One was to shut up and listen, because I didn't have a choice. And there are a few times when I'd hear people talking, I'd be like, this has nothing to do with it. Lord, what are we doing here? All right. And then later being like, oh my gosh, like so wrong. Jeff, you're so wrong. Like I learned so much from those people. I love them so much now. But the whole idea of that book and the program was like, get yourself in your sweet spot. What is your sweet spot? And if that's your sweet spot and you want to do something for the world or whatever you might want to do, then go take that and let's go do it. And so that's why when I got done and the trading had been getting worse, and I'm like, all right, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I looked to my friend, I'm like, Murph, you got me into this. I'm like, so what am I going to do? He's like, well, let's start looking at stuff. So he just would provide me inner opportunities. And one day, I was a member of Glen Oak Country Club. I no longer am, but a longtime member. And Murph always used to call it our club. And he'd be like, who are we going to take? I go, I got someone we need to take to our club. And it was a guy named Tim Mons.
Oh, yeah.
I think you remember Tim. And Tim's like, hey, have you ever thought about, do you know anything about the National Christian Foundation? I'm like, no. Yeah. And he starts talking to me about it. And so next thing you know, I'm interviewing for the president's role. But when I go to interview, Randy, I can't think of the guy's name from NCF corporate, but he's like, hey, we just offered this job to a great guy, Joe Pringle.
Yep.
And Joe Pringle, I just was in lunch with him, and he's such a dear friend, brother.
And if listeners want to go to listen to Joe's story, go back a couple of years in the episodes, right, and you'll find the story on Joe.
Yeah, and so I asked a friend. So they're like, well, you don't seem like you're in a hurry for a job. I go, well, I'm not, but I do want to get going. And they're like, well, I think we're hiring Joe. We think you'd be a terrific relationship manager, and you guys would probably be a real good team. Could you wait a couple months? I go, sure. So I get a call from Joe, and he's like, let's go out for breakfast. And we met for breakfast, had a really good breakfast, and I came away I'm like, okay, yeah, this seems like something I would love to do with Joe.
Yeah.
And then I called a friend of mine, Bob Walsh. I'll never forget. I go, Bob, do you know? Yeah, Joe Pringle, greatest guy ever. I go, well, I might have an opportunity to go kind of restart this NCF, the National Christian Foundation, Chicago with him. And he's like, I go, what do you think? He's like, I would sell my business tomorrow to go work with Joe Pringle, his exact words. And I'm like, terrific. So then, and I know you just did this, but one of the smartest things Joe's like, hey, I know we're both taking a significant pay cut in this world. We're both trying to do something different than we've ever done. He goes, I think, our wives need to buy into this. Mm-hmm. He's like, I think we need to go out with our wives and let's go have dinner. So we met at Season 52, had a terrific time together. We walk out. He's like, hey, I'm offering you this job. I want you to have, or no, at the dinner table, he offers me the job. We're walking out to the parking lot. He kind of pulls me aside. He's like, actually, I don't think I can offer you that job yet. I got to talk to them. I'm like, all right, Joe, don't worry. I won't tell anybody. And but now Joe is one of my dearest friends. As he said, he always calls me his younger brother. He always wished he had a younger brother. But a dear friend. He's taught me so much.
Yeah.
And,
oh, gosh.
And we're so lucky.
Listen, I always like, when we grow up, we want to be like Joe and Tammy.
Right.
Because it's just like.
And so God has this way of just putting these people in your life that at the time you might not, you're not thinking that big a deal of it. And I just think as you get older, you're kind of like, oh, wow. Like if, like I say, like if you're going to write your own obituary, it's kind of like, okay, this person, here's a reason why you might even want to spend any time with me, because I got to spend this time with this person. Yeah. He taught me these things. This couple taught us this, right? And Joe and Tammy, they're the ultimate hospitality. They invite us up. I always play in a golf tournament with him pretty much every year. And we have such a good time. Got to know his family. And like the modeling he's done with his kids, like to watch them. I'll never forget, I was having a conversation with my daughters. He was listening into the next room at the office. And he's like, and it was about going to church at college. And he's like, Jeff, I want to show you something. This is like 2 days later, he gets out a letter, and I don't remember which child he wrote it to, but he gets out a letter. He goes, here, I just want you to read this. It was a letter that he wrote to his child, talking to them about, hey, I hope we raised you in this way, and we would love to see you. Just kind of like, I love you. Yeah. Would love to see you at church. But, once again, it's not like I'm not going to love you if you're not at church.
Right.
And I was just like, that is so cool. So he mentored but modeled.
Yeah. Get back to the modeling, right? I mean, the modeling out. And people always say it, right? The kids aren't going to hear what you say, right? But they're gonna catch and watch what you're doing, and that's the living that out and the values getting played out. and the modeling it that you said that you want to keep doing. And if we open our eyes and look at the people around us, right, there's great models.
Oh, yeah,
There's also very bad models. So careful what you're doing on social media, careful what you're watching in the news, et cetera, et cetera. But there's so many great models to catch, right, to take that in and to think through. And the honor, right, the humbling aspect of the work that we do, right, at Clearwater Capital, working with families, the work that you do at NCF to sit with phenomenal families that are really trying to think about how they get this right. We get a glimpse behind the scenes into some of just fantastic families and how they're processing and thinking about it. How do you not ruin the kids with the money and the wealth? And how do you do this right? Because there's no answer on it and there's no script. Back to wisdom has to come into it so that people don't make missteps. So what is NCF then as a business model? Yeah. Now you're into this business, doing it with Joe, loving that. But what is it?
So it's a donor advised fund platform. A donor advised fund is, just think of it as a charitable checking account. That's all it is. You get your deduction when you put your dollars or your, let's say, assets that you can give assets, which make a lot of sense. So that's what you put in there, and then you can give that cash out over time. You can invest it and let it grow, right? And then you can give it away. And so that's what NCF does, right? That's if the world said, "What are you?" We're a donor advised fund platform. What makes us different? We are a faith aligned donor advised fund platform. So we're always trying to build community. I had a conversation yesterday with an attorney, and it was about a wealthy family for matriarch, patriarch. A lot of times that's a lonely place. And I know people are like, "Oh, cry me a river. Right. You're rich." I'm like, no, it is. It's a terrible yoke to carry, right? And then you put that on top of one day, I want to sit and talk to somebody that's really important in this world to me and be like, and kind of have to explain myself, right? And I want to hear good and faithful. I want to hear that someday. So, and I think these people want to hear that. And so then you put this idea of, well, I have all these resources, right? God, you've given them to me. Well, now I got to do something good with them, right? And the world's telling me something different. Oftentimes my advisors are telling me something different. So then it's kind of like, okay, how do we do this and how do we do it well? And I just think, like, I'm not a pastor. I always say there's much better RMs than Jeff. Yeah. I can talk about my faith when it comes to money and numbers. Yeah. But I'm not the guy. I go out for breakfast with some of my buddies. We could be praying for the chef by the end of the night, at the end of the day, literally, just because that's the way they are. Yeah. That's not me. Yeah. But when it comes to you just get to have these really very neat little like I heard you once say, it's the phone call you get that has nothing to do with money from your client, right? He's calling you about a family issue because you built that. That's the special place to be. And I think we get to be in a very special place with
it's actually people. Something Kevin Rochford brought up. Back to Kevin. Yeah. Kevin Rochford brought up, in that conversation of, you know that you're intimate, with a family, because these are discussions that are very private, very personal, very confidential. There's probably a little bit of a dark side to that, right? Because it probably shouldn't be, because you're ascribing more value to the money than maybe it should have. But that aspect of going, no, you're actually just doing life with people. This is the role that you play. And the significance of that. It could be in ministry. It could be, in a not-for-profit. It can be in business, right? That business aspect of making that difference in the world. But Kevin brought that up.
In fact, Kevin called me at first. He's like, "Hey, you left this, like I always call it the real world, secular world, to work in the nonprofit world." And he's like, I might want to do that. I have a lot of people that call me about that. Because they're like, "Hey, you look like you successfully have made this change." And I'm always to people, I'm like, whoa. Yeah. You can be a light whatever you're doing. You don't have to go in the nonprofit world to make a difference, right?
Right.
And that's what I started with Kevin. I'm like, whoa, Kevin, I don't think you have to leave your world to go do that. But I do know of places that probably treat their clients and talk about things that other places don't. Right. So I'll introduce you to some people that John, you scared me to death when I used to meet. Really smart guy. I'm like, if I say something wrong, what I loved about you, John, always is you let everybody know where you're at. There's no question where you're at. And I love that, but that also scared me when I first started. I'm like in these conversations with these attorneys and everything, and they might be talking about something. I'm like, well, I think it's this, but I'm not going to say anything, right? But now I'm going to say it. And so NCF is a donor advised fund platform. We get to work with families. It's not just really wealthy families. I work with some kids that just got out of Wheaton College that pool their money together, and then they meet about it, and then they decide where they're going to give, and they'll only give someplace where they can actually give their time.
Wow.
All right? And it started with another young man. He's not really a young man anymore. I've been here 8 years, and I want to say 7 years ago they started. And now this guy's actually bought and sold a few businesses. He's doing very well. But his friends, they still do this, and now it's the couples. They get together, and they get to do this. So we get to work with all kinds of people. But yeah, that's at the core of what we get to do.
So we back up a little bit. So Tim Mons with NCF when it started in Chicago on the governance board. I chaired the advisory board back at the governance board. We went through a restructuring in terms of what it meant for it to be a corporate aspect of NCF. NCF now, last year took in $3 billion?
$3.8 billion. Right? We took in about $90 million here in Chicago.
And so it is a national organization, gift planners and the expertise that's tapped into, not just in Chicago, but on a national basis, and that interface that plays. People can look at cash and put in cash, one to many, right? You put it in, you get your charitable deduction in the year that it goes into the fund. Even if you don't give it out, right? And you give it out. If you give it to 10 different charities coming out, you still have one receipt for tax purposes. So it simplifies tax times, which is when I first got engaged back in our 2012 audit, when the IRS threw out all of our charitable deductions and said, here's what you owe us. It's like, yeah, no. And after 6 months and a lot of paperwork and a lot of fighting, they finally accepted our tax return as originally submitted. I'm like, okay, but there's got to be a better way, and that's how he got involved with NCF and being like, this is a better way.
Yeah.
It's not the be-all, end-all, right? No. There are different charitable trusts and foundations.
It's one tool.
It's one tool, and that gets into the strategy overall in terms of how it fits. But it's a fantastic tool, and the way the tax code is actually set up gives benefit to the use of a donor advised fund platform over, say, a private foundation.
Yeah.
In charitable trusts play different roles, so there's several things that are way beyond the scope of this conversation. But $3.8 billion in, multiple billion going out.
3.2 out.
3.2 out. So there's over time where different people use it in different ways, but getting funds deployed and the tax benefits associated with it and the thought process. But it's not just cash in. Long-term appreciated securities. So if you've got your stock or fund or whatever, you can gift that in. But there is an aspect when it gets into illiquid, right? And we talk about the great wealth transfer that's taking place from an inheritance viewpoint, but also during one's lifetime. And we've done transactions with clients, business interests. It could be real estate. It could be mineral rights. It could be timber. It could be a whole lot of different things.
You've had me look at all kinds of stuff, John.
All kinds of, right? Because you never know. And
I've learned a tremendous amount.
It's like, Jeff, what about this?
Yeah.
How do we do this? You've actually now gone off and created another platform, a sister business, right? In your own entrepreneurial spirit of saying, okay, there's something, because when you get to any large organization, sometimes it's like, all right, we have everything set. And as the world continues to innovate and evolve, sometimes it's like, yeah, that gets into a level of risk or something that we just don't understand, even though there's a whole lot that's fantastic about what comes in.
Oh, yeah.
This gets into then the crypto world, right? And decentralized finance and digital. And so
which you also did a wonderful past podcast on with your son-in-law.
Yeah. Which thank you for listening to that one.
I've listened to almost all of them. I want to tell you, I have.
And so that one's you create. So talk about this now. Right. Your entrepreneurial journey on that platform and what that's facilitated for people within really a new asset class.
So NCF has National Christian Foundation has a $10 billion balance sheet, right? So they've gotten to be so big. They're not going to take a lot of risk, right? And a lot of people consider the crypto world, right? They consider that a risky world. I'm not necessarily one of those people. So 5 years ago, one of my old trading partners came to me. They run one of the top crypto firms in the United States, came to me. And he's like, hey, we want to give $1 million worth of Bitcoin to 4 charities here in Chicago. And, we called them and they don't feel comfortable taking it, or they don't know how, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, his name's Tim, and Tim's like, hey, Jeff, can NCF help with that? And I'm like, no, NCF doesn't take it. We have a sister charity that one of our founders set up, and they had taken a crypto donation a couple of years prior, and everything that could go wrong went wrong. Lawsuit, they killed the market, then they ended up getting some stolen, like a lot of bad things. So, our founder's got a sour, right? Obviously, as any board member is like, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. So long and short, he said, well, we don't feel comfortable setting up their wallets. Could you help them? Well, I had played around with it. I knew just enough to be really dangerous. So I talked to the 4, 3 of the 4. One of them ended up being able to do. 3 of the 4, I got them on, and they got it set up, and they gave them the Bitcoin. Now, the one thing I will say is they did not want them to sell the Bitcoin. This is 2020. I think it was at 13,000 at the time. And I'm like, guys, you can't tell these small charities that they can't sell like a large gift like that, right? And I'm like, I just don't think that's right. And so they did not put that restriction on them, and they all sold it. But then, long and short, my friend was like, I don't understand why you don't set up a charity to do this. I don't know how to do that. I don't have time. Well, then I found out one night looking at it over Thanksgiving that you can actually 1023 online. You can set it up 1023. So I go online, I set it up. My attorney, CPA guy, Steve Anderson, no way they're gonna approve that. Well, I think that was November, March of the next year, we take it for charity is approved.
And so Form 1023 for listeners is the application for getting a tax-exempt status on a new entity.
And so our tax-exempt status is to facilitate non-cash gifts. Specifically, crypto was listed in there, and then to distribute it to charities. Not necessarily donor-advised funds, but most of what we take it for charity does is work with NCF givers. I do work with other givers, but I take things, crypto one of them. I take a ton of grain now around the country. I take troubled real estate. My dad was an electrician. So I grew up in the trades working on it. So I love to rehab houses. So I've taken some troubled real estate, stuff that NCF just won't take.
Yeah.
So they call me. I've taken some private equity and different things because donor advised funds, and this is beyond this talk, but there's this thing called excess business holdings. A donor advised fund can only hold something for 5 years, is basically, just think of that. Yeah. All right. So after 5 years, they have to do something with it. Well, if you have a PE investment sitting in a private equity investment sitting inside an LLC that has up to 14 years before the dollars are going to be returned, a donor advised fund might say like, no, we can't take that LLC investment. Meanwhile, I'm not a donor advised fund. I'm just a straight public charity. We don't have EBH issues. So I can hold an asset. And this entity had like 8 different investments, private equity, venture capital, real estate. And big NCF giver, it was his father's estate, ended up taking a $5 million gift in. And so we've been I just been putting everything in, and slowly it's been going off, and I send the money on to NCF. So we get to do a lot of different things. Yeah. And I just say we get to do the things that NCF can't do. And then sometimes I've sent it to Schwab, I've sent it to a variety of places, and sometimes to end user charities. I've had some farmers send me 1,000 bushels of corn when it's at $5. It's $5,000, right? And our fees are 1% or $250 minimum now. So then, and they're like, oh, I really just want this sent to my Mennonite church, their church. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no problem. So I'll call the church, find out who it is, and I send the money along. So anyway, I'm like, as long as the dollars are going to charitable good, right, I'm all for it. Yeah. And it gets back to, I think it really gets back to what Bob Shank and the whole halftime thing was. Hey, I'm stupid enough or crazy enough to set up a charity so I can be creatively use finance to help these people. And so now I get phone calls all the time from different people. I've taken eggs, I've taken cattle, I've been asked to take sperm of prize things, and that I've not done. But you get to research a lot of things, right? Yeah. And the tax law, a lot of people don't like to read tax code. I don't mind.
Put on your CPA hat.
Right.
So the intertwining of all these things, right?
It's
the
a neat
CPA hat,
space.
the trading aspect of going, okay, how do I exit and liquidate over time without tanking a market in order to create the value back for the end charity so the giver's happy and the charity's happy as the intermediary that you come into being with that. And that is your own entrepreneurial journey in terms of creating that, because the need is there. And the need is there because people have all kinds of assets. Some of them you've named that I wouldn't have thought of, right? And putting value on. I want to see the valuation done on that.
Well, and that's it. Most of the stuff you have to get an appraisal.
Right.
So then it's meeting the appraisers. So I know appraisers all over that do all kinds of things. Yeah. And then there's like 13 points that the IRS over time has said what makes a qualified charitable gift appraisal. That's different than just an appraisal. Yeah. So all the time I'm educating great CPAs about this. Like, well, no, that appraisal doesn't have everything. And actually NCF put together a great paper. We send them so they can see. But I just want to get, when I started We Take It, never imagine that it would do anything. Just zero. We don't advertise. I don't talk to people. No, but
now you're on this podcast.
Yeah, I know.
Right? So
now I'm saying
it,
but like we took in. I mean, we have a balance sheet of like 10 million. We took in $15 million worth of stuff last year. 12 million left, but some things haven't sold, right? So you logically
take your time.
Yeah, so it goes up and down. It'll go up and down. But we just get to talk to so many people. And so like yesterday I was talking to somebody and it was kind of like, we want to do this. I'm like, oh, well, I have a giver that one time called me not long ago, 6 months ago, sold his business, had been at a high school reunion. A retired factory worker friend, had a special needs daughter. I think she was 40-some years old. His van's like 20 years old, Jeff. It doesn't run anymore. He goes, it just broke my heart. He's got a sizable amount in his donor advised fund. He's like, could I ever use my donor advised fund to do that? And this is where I get excited because I'm like, well, no, you can't do that with NCF directly. But man, I know someone you need to know. I introduced them to Helping Hands. Helping Hands was set up for these type of things. Yeah. They basically have like social workers that go out, and I always say, the person's going to have to be willing to give a lot of information up, answer questions, but as long as they can dot the I's and cross the T's, they can do it. $80,000 later, a brand new van for his friend so he could take his daughter who loved to be out and about. Yeah. And I'm like, what a neat thing. Like, just to, like I have like such a minute part of that. But what a neat place to be.
But back to the network, right? Back to connecting and who's got the answers to what. So when we're working with clients and we're thinking through things, our team is just over 30 individuals, right? Well, we're not going to insource absolutely every aspect of someone's life, right? We can't do that, nor would it make sense to. In this open architecture aspect of how we approach families, the focus being we can get best in class of whatever is needed when it comes to law firms, right? Transactions, estate attorneys, various accounting firms, risk management aspects, to services of shipping artwork. And we can tap into all of that. And that's what you're saying. But that comes back to the network of saying, how do you get in? This is what's kind of fun with Kevin as he started with us, coming from some big institutional in. He's like, we could access everything and then some through the network versus the big name places having their proprietary whatever because of the pride and the locking that in and trying to squeeze every last dime. It's like, well, no, that's not what we're in here. We're in it to how we serve, but leveraging the network aspect of it. And then why do people go through this? Right, they do it, and I'm going to reference a book here that I shared with you before, but because money only goes to one of three places: their family, the charities that are important to them, and the efforts, and their taxes. That's it, right? And I've had people be like, okay, well, there's got to be a fourth. I'm like, no, there's not, right? You're either you're earning it, you're getting it, you're investing it for the future. For what? For either your family or charity, or to pay tax on it. I mean, that's what you're investing it for. It's one of those three places during your lifetime and in the end. And so that balance of saying, okay, well, out of that, everyone has to make a decision on that allocation. What do you want that to look like? Both now for this year's tax return, but also when you pass, have you done the math in terms of what the tax bill looks like on that too? That's it. So this book I referenced that I'm not going to share the name on, nor the authors in going through this, because when I read it, it's a book on philanthropy. It's a book on generosity. But it's just an aspect of what was said in here that I want to get your reaction on. However, high net worth individuals aren't particularly concerned about changes to the tax code, right? Let me read that again just to listen, right? High net worth individuals are not particularly concerned about changes to the tax code. Multimillionaires and billionaires don't need the tax write-off. So they essentially ignore this aspect of the interplay between taxes and charitable gifting.
Not the people
right?
I get to talk to.
Not the people I get. There's a whole book. I mean, and there's some points in here that I read and I'm like, yeah, there's legitimate points. But I read something like that and I'm like, that's none of the people that we work with that would say that they're not interested. Because if you can shift more financial assets, whether it be giving from your balance sheet, right, giving of the business, giving of the real estate, giving of the corn or the soybeans or anything, if you can give that, you get greater tax benefit from the deference of the income or of the capital gain associated with it. To do what? To keep more for your family and for charity versus taxes. So how does NCF work with families on the front end? They're like, okay, I've got some ideas. And whether it's a crypto type or it's a straight business type, how does that actually even play out in terms of the expertise, the wisdom that can guide families to making a decision regarding that allocation amongst those three buckets?
So I love that what you said, because we always talk about having the three buckets, and you have that tax bucket, you have the giving bucket, and you have the family bucket, right? And we have this little PDF where you can see in the dollars coming out of the tax bucket and going into the charitable bucket, right? And we love that thought. But the way you do that is a highly appreciated capital assets, right? If we have these capital assets that are appreciated, you've held them long term, so longer than a year. So oftentimes RIAs, different people, advisors from attorneys, accountants, they'll come to us and, hey, I have a client that might be going through something. Maybe it's a sale. They have a second home they're thinking about. Well, they're generous. So I want them to think about this. So I say people come with an idea and we want to talk to them about that idea. But most of the time I'd say we try to get them to step back. And you said it, we kind of want to look at their balance sheet. Because you come with an idea, but sometimes those gifts, like a gift of a business, if it's an S Corp that has a lot of hot assets, there's just some different things that I say, it takes away the efficiency of a gift. I want the most money to go to charity, right? And so if it's not getting the most money, like I always tell business owners, I go, well, I was a business owner. I was always told to take my real estate outside my business, and I want to pay my wife rent. So, actually it's an LLC and we have I'm like, well, I go, you might, as you're thinking about selling your business, let's put a nice juicy 20-year, right? Let's do a 20-year lease to that LLC. Guess what? There's no recapture on real estate. Meaning, if you sell something that you've taken depreciation on, you're actually going to pay tax on it. You might be paying tax on it. Right. Charities don't. We don't pay tax. Charities don't pay tax on 5 types of income. They're all passive. So everyone you think of passive, rent, interest, that kind of stuff, right? So this idea of give me the LLC that owns the real estate, that's a highly efficient gift. And oftentimes it can be 2 to 3x of the additional dollars for the charity. So that's why I say it's always starting a conversation. And just so you know, I'm not the one making those decisions. I can run the numbers myself, but at NCF, we have 2 sets of attorneys. One set, I call it the creative set, right? They end up doing a gift illustration. So we'll ask for information from the giver, right? The giver gives us some information because we're like, hey, good information in gives you good information out, right? So you give us that information, and then we're going to give you a 5-page document, and we're actually going to compare it. If you did nothing, here's what you end up with. Here's what the U.S. government ends up with. Now let's look at it as if you did a cash gift, right? Because I always say most people are going to be generous in some ways, right? So, okay, you're going to do a cash gift. Well, let's look at that, and then let's look at that against giving an asset, an appreciated asset. And then when we compare those, sometimes people's eyes are like, what?
Right. Because sometimes, not only are they preserving liquidity for themselves, sometimes the family's actually keeping more by giving more to charity because it's just the
The
allocation.
family
process,
bucket's
bucket,
bigger,
and the
charity bucket. Oh yeah,
right? And who, that's why when I read this, going, every family that millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars is absolutely thinking about the tax line item from income, capital gains, and then charitable, and then estate tax. It all is in there because tax is such a big expense. I mean, it's just going to be part of it, and you can work through that. Valerie Hogan on our team, who you also know very well.
I love her.
Valerie came to us because she was a colleague of yours at NCF.
Yeah.
And then Valerie's looked at it because she was working with families and thinking through these things, and decided that she wanted to move into the work directly with the family on the overall financial planning, the estate strategy, the financial planning with the accountants. So as a family office wealth advisor on our team now, still coming back to interface with NCF. This is why I throw all my crazy ideas. Hey, Jeff, how does this work? Can we do this? Can the family do this? Because if we're doing our job well, we're in those conversations.
Yeah, amen.
So that you can do it. Because if it gets fully baked and we come back and say, well, here's exactly what it is, we're missing the opportunity of leveraging the gift planning attorneys that are on the NCF team. Now for listeners to think, well, I already have an estate attorney, and then I've got my transactional attorney, and I've got my general counsel. It's like, yeah, and this is one more attorney that's on the team, but on the team at NCF that just has a different perspective regarding some of the nuances that you talked about on the tax with your CPA hat on, that they also bring in from a collaborative viewpoint where they're not displacing, they're not duplicating, they're actually integrating additional aspects into how those transactions work. And then ultimately, when the business sells downstream, maybe within the 5 years, right? So if we go with that it's gifted, pick up the tax benefit for usually multiple years, given the size of it, transaction happens, the monetization event happens, when you have the cash flowing back into the donor-advised fund.
Yeah.
So there is this aspect in terms of our relationship together and our own collaboration with NCF and with all the other professionals that come into play back to the network in order to make these things happen for people. And that is significance. It's significance whether you're sitting in the ministry, it's significant. I look at it in terms of the work that I do is absolutely part of that. We love having Valerie on our team, right, in terms of her work then back with families. And we got a lot of clients that utilize and leverage NCF in varying ways. And we'd encourage that for listeners, if you don't know NCF, to reach out. If you do want people to contact you because they have bushels of some grain that they want to.
Anybody that wants to give more, if they want to give more, I say it all. I don't care whether you use NCF. I don't care whether you use We Take It. Like I say, I'm back to the calling. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to get more dollars into the kingdom. How do I do that? Most of what I do is educate. We go out and educate, and you'd be amazed at how many really smart advisors. I'll talk to people. They're like, man, you really know. I'm like, yeah, but that's all I know. That's all I talk about, right? And I always tell people about your advisors. This is when they're worth their weight in gold. I know people don't like to pay fees, but I'm like, no, this is when you need those advisors, right? My buddy Joe talks about some of the mistakes he's made. And I've made some big mistakes too because I didn't have those right advisors in my life. And so I just say hey, bringing those people around the table and bringing NCF in costs you nothing. Only if you do the gift is it going to cost you anything. And the cost is you're going to help support our ministry. We're a 501(c)(3). And so the idea is I always just say, hey, we're going to help give you better information so you can make a better information.
Right.
You can make a better decision. And it's up to you. Whatever you do is up to you.
Right.
But if you do it, just know we do more of this than anybody else out there.
Yeah. Yeah. In that, if you look at that math, right? People are like, oh, all of a sudden they hear a fee, right? And they're like, okay, and sometimes people just get too cheap or they get penny wise, pound foolish in terms of where they're, and it's like, if you look at the tax savings alone, right? And what you can redirect, that's going to be multiples of what the fee is in order to get this done and get the right expertise in. And you still see the illustration of what you have as a family versus the charity versus the tax piece of it.
And I think the other thing I think people don't think a lot about, but in reality, I think people get really excited about, and you've used that term, we have this generosity ecosystem. So we're always the introductions and the network, right? So we're having events, or we're introducing people to others that are having events that are helping them to think through generosity, right? Like all kinds of charities get a lot of checks from NCF and or ACHs, right? So they're always like, how do I get more money from NCF? And I'm like, I have absolutely very little to do with it.
Yeah.
People come with passions, right? Yeah. And they're going to support it, but there are plenty of times they might say, hey, we're supporting this. Like, who else in this? Oh, I would love to introduce you. I know some other, right? And we have a research team. That's all they do, right? Yeah. So we can help you think through that. And then other times it's like, well, how do we get our family involved, right? A lot of matriarch and patriarchs are worried about that. And so that's another conversation, absolutely. Right? And it's like, well, this group helps with family meetings, right? This group can help you here. I can tell you after being in many family meetings, like, here's what I've learned about it. I mean, just like I was with an estate planning attorney yesterday, and it's one of the things I just can't believe how many times I talk to husband and wives, and I'm like, hey, have you sat down with your kids and let them know your estate plan? And some of them cringe. They're like, no, why would I do that? Yeah. And I'm like, you really want your attorney to be the one that talks to them about that? You know, and then also, I know people love this idea of giving end of life, but I'm like, God made us like there's all kinds of studies. Generous people are happy people, right? So I'm like, why wouldn't you want to be happy? Yeah. So with good advisors, you can give plenty during your lifetime. And guess what? The U.S. government actually gives you a break for being generous.
Yeah, right.
So let's try to do some of that giving during your life. Yeah. Not just at end. And I mean, everybody, as people want to do it, they do it.
I encourage people to go back to listen to the last episode preceding this with Kate Gardner. When Kate talks about how she sat down with her parents, again, take a listen to it, in her parents' communication and the sudden wealth syndrome aspect of the overwhelming nature of dealing with that. And it's like, here's an opportunity now as a family to come together going, how do you do this? If you want to keep passing on values, why would you want those values to be communicated along with whatever the inheritance is after you're gone? It just, and by doing, some people are like, oh, well, I don't want to make the money a thing. It's like, by not talking about it, you're making it a thing.
Right.
Yeah. Because the next generation knows because they're seeing what car you're driving or where you're living or what you're doing. You're making it a thing by not talking about it. So you might as well start talking about it in an age appropriate way, appropriate for the cognitive capability of the child and where they're at. But you got to start someplace. And I believe the charitable piece is the best place to start the conversation because it starts bringing in values. It starts bringing in discernment. And how do you teach wisdom when knowledge is a commodity? Right. How do you underwrite a charity? Going, not all charities are good, right?
Right.
You know, whether they've got a title, that says Christian on it, and or church on it, doesn't mean they're a good steward of the resources. You may not want to be given to them, right? So you've got to understand that, which also takes the time and talent, and the involvement before you actually even write those checks. So good giving is hard.
It is hard. There's a great book, When Helping Hurts.
Yeah.
And that's what, like, some people with dollars are like, oh, like, if I gave that much, like, just think like, okay, how is that going to change that charity, right? There's a lot of different things you have to, that's where it gets back to, like, as a wealthy person, like, hey, I want to give this money away, but I don't want to I don't want everyone in church to know that I could just go pay for this, right? Or I don't want the church to, and I'm always like, well, you never want it to all of a sudden change their operating budget, right? So let's make sure that we're not, I have some givers I get to work with, and he'll just call me, be like, hey, I was just, I'm driving here and I was listening, and this pastor, I love what he's doing. And they just opened a community center, but they don't have any furniture. Hey, Jeff, can we do that? I'm like, yeah, I can introduce you to the right people that we can get that done. And he gets so passionate about it. And I love listening, right? Yeah. And I'm like, once again, I get to be a really, really small piece, right? And one time he had this same individual, a framer, that didn't speak really good English, but they didn't feel in their community that they had English as a second language, a good school. They didn't have a good school for that. And so their church, a little church, was going to build a school. And this guy calls me. He's like, hey, he's been talking about this. We've been talking about the Lord. He goes, I really want to support this. He goes, but he can't understand me and I can't understand him. and I'm like, well, you know what? I am sure that we have somebody that is bilingual in Spanish. So we actually got someone on our contributions team to get on a phone call. We figured it out. And then it was a really neat conversation because they thought they needed about 250. They were building it themselves, like just really neat. And they thought they needed $250,000 to do this. And I talked to him about it. I'm like, well, do you really want to fund the whole thing, or how do you want to do? And we just had his wife, we got involved. We started talking. We're like, well, let's start with $50,000. And let's just, almost like a construction loan. We're not telling them we're going to do that, but this is what we're going to do. So then he's like, well, I can't get there. I go, well, we have an office close to there. I can have someone go take video. They take video and they come back. He's like, oh, I think we should do another 50. I'm like, all right, let's do another 50. Right. And so, the giver's getting excited. Right. And then the neatest thing about all of it, and it's not the size of the money. Like, Jesus said, very, very great story. The woman who put the 2 shekels in, that's the person that really, that did the most. Right. Not the person that's writing the big check that really makes no difference in their life.
Right.
But the church, the school, had a family from every classroom do a video, and with someone that spoke English, and talk about what it meant to their child to be in that classroom. It was K through 6. And he sent that to me, and I got to watch it. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you have to. And he's like, yeah, but I don't, they don't want their name on anything. They don't, right? But I'm like, hey, is there any way so we have 200 people that are in Alpharetta that are the operations team. So they're making all these things happen, right? I get to work with the givers. I get to see how it affects them and what it does for their families, right? And so I'm like, hey, could I show my team this? He's like, yeah. He goes, I'm like, they won't know it's you. Like that. So next thing you know, we all get together once a year. They're showing this video up there. Just the idea of showing them, hey, each of us, we have this little part.
Little part right? That we all play.
But this is how we get to change. Like, we get to be a small part of what someone is getting so excited about. And that was the families. And then I got to speak a little bit of like, well, here's how it helped our family that we get to work with, right? Right? And so, like I say, it's a very special place we get to be.
Well, we are burning through time here, covering a lot of different
I love to talk. I'm sorry.
No, gosh, do not apologize. Before I give you the last words of wisdom, as we close up here, I appreciate your enthusiasm, your energy, your intellect that comes around this, the bringing networks together like that to solve problems. I thank you for the introductions with Kevin, right? With Valerie coming over to our team, right? You're a great feeder pipeline back into our growth and what we're taking place, because we all play these different parts, right? These different roles. We couldn't do.
Well, we've had some of your clients have used NCF, and it's been a pleasure to work with them. We love to see that, and so we each have our part. Right? And as long as we know we're not that important, right, we get to multiply, right? We get to some type of return.
Such a collaborative effort, and this is where I think the industry gets it wrong, because it tries to put its arms around it and keep it. It thinks that the assets are theirs versus the people that they're supposed to be serving, and that's a problem into itself. But to live that open-handedly and be like, no, if we can do the right thing for the families. Now, the items we didn't get into today, right? Well, why a donor advised fund versus a private foundation versus certain charitable trust versus, all of those are various tools, and a lot of families use multiple tools because they serve different purposes. There's different aspects of the tax code that allows you to structure things in ways. So let's save that for another day. Happy to have that conversation with anyone. But donor advised funds. I use, Melissa and I do all of our charitable giving through our NCF Donor Advised Fund. The families that we serve, a lot of them, whether it be appreciated securities or business interests, and we'll keep the illustrations going because there's so much opportunity to shift assets and financial assets to families. The charity's important to them. And you know what? And we can take it out of taxes because that's the tax code. That's the way it's set up. Nothing is wrong about any of this. It's tax avoidance. It's not tax evasion. That's the way the tax code. So we don't make the rules, but we can maximize them for people too. So closing words of wisdom, and we'll wrap it up for the day, Jeff.
Closing words of wisdom. Well, we each have our own place to serve other people, and this can be in financial. It can be in all kinds of different ways. And so I just think for each one of us, if we can just think of, like the Visa commercial, right? If we can each just serve somebody in a different or a more special way today, you make an impact that can make an impact way beyond anything you and I can ever think about. And I try to express that to our team. And I'm on this 1% rule right now thing, 1% improvement per day. What is it? It's like the power of 37 times or something by the end of a year, right? And we don't think about it, but I think about that when I talk to you about something and you are like, yeah, I can research that and I can do that. All the times we're doing things, don't think that you have to see some immediate return. God has a plan. We're a small part of it. And I always say to my team, I'm like, hey, have your hands up. We're there to serve people as they need to be served. And let's do the best we can. And that's all we're trying to do.
Amen to that. So there's the challenge. Listeners, take this in. Think about before you go to bed tonight, whatever day you're listening to this on, right? For one person, for one interaction, for one being a little bit more patient when the person cuts you off in traffic, the barista at the coffee shop, the coworker, where you can just do one small nice thing to make a difference for them and live it out generously with your time, talent, and treasure. With that, if you want to continue the conversation, if you want to get in contact with Jeff, send us an email at clearconversations@ccpwealth.com and have a blessed day.